Have you ever wondered what really happened during the Quidditch World Cup? After all, in the movie, we cut straight from Cornelius Fudge starting the match to the Death Eaters in the camps. We miss out on the entire match itself and a lot of fun stuff leading up to it as well. Things like Fred and George's insane bet that pays them galleons upon galleons, Harry's encounter with Winky the house elf, and Victor Crumb's incredible capture of the snitch are all removed from the movie to save time. In this video, I'm going to uncover each of these critical moments in the plot by telling you everything about chapters 6, 7, and 8 of the Goblet of Fire, which all got condensed to just 5 minutes in the film. So sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy as you learn exactly what happened during Harry's time at the Quidditch World Cup. My name is Gibby, and welcome to episode 44 of Movies vs. Manuscripts, Harry Potter Edition. Typically, I would do a movie recap and then cover all the changes across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But today is going to be a little different, because essentially every part of the scene in the movie is wrong when you compare it to the book. I totally understand why they had to condense it, because if they didn't, the movie would have been 10 hours long. But as massive Harry Potter fans, it's always fun to relive the book and see everything that we missed. So just for this video, let's skip the movie recap and the specific categories and just go through these pages one by one, revealing every bit of lore and detail that we love as fans of the Wizarding World. And believe me, these chapters show us more about the Wizarding World than just about any chapter in the series, as Harry gets his first taste of international magic. But before he gets there, we of course need to start at the Burrow, as they wake up early in the morning to make their appointment with the Portkey. These chapters pick up the day after Harry had arrived at the Burrow. And just for some context, in case you forgot, Fred and George had gotten in trouble the day before for nearly choking Dudley Dursley. Harry had learned the previous day that the twins were concocting their own magical toys and treats and selling them under the name of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. But Mrs. Weasley was extremely disapproving of this and had attempted to shut down their entire enterprise. Now keep this in mind as we go through these chapters today and as we continue throughout the entire book, because the Weasley twins have an entire subplot of their own that never made the cut for the film. Anyway, now that you have that context, we can move on downstairs as everyone gathers for breakfast, and Mr. Weasley asks Harry how his Muggle disguise looks. You see, the World Cup is so large that it has to be held in a Muggle area, and therefore wizards and witches are supposed to dress as Muggles so as not to attract attention. This is a big difference between the books and movies, because in the movies they show pretty much every wizard wearing relatively normal clothes. But in the books, wizards and witches wore robes, strange hats, and bright colors a lot of the time, causing them to look extremely strange in public. After Harry confirmed that Mr. Weasley's golfing sweater and baggy jeans were okay to wear, we hear about apparition. Fred and George complain about how they can't apparate to the World Cup, as Bill, Charlie, and Percy are all sleeping in. They don't have to hike to the Portkey because they can simply apparate to the proper campsite. Harry asks about apparition and learns that not all adult wizards have their license to apparate, because it is very dangerous and difficult magic. Mr. Weasley shares that just recently someone without a license was caught apparating because they had split themselves in half on accident. Something that's just a little different than the movie though is that splinching doesn't sound too gruesome, but more so an inconvenience. Mr. Weasley explains that the person who split themselves in half actually survived, no harm done, but they got quite a big fine for apparating without a license. So it's a little unclear on how bloody splinching actually is. Anyway, before officially heading out, Mrs. Weasley catches Fred and George attempting to smuggle their candy out of the house, and uses the charm Accio to summon everything that they were trying to hide. The twins protest, but Mrs. Weasley is having none of it and sends them on their way. So, in a sour mood, they head out of the Burrow and begin to hike to Stoat's Head Hill, where the Portkey is located. Mr. Weasley explains yet another part of the Wizarding World to Harry, saying that a Portkey is an everyday object the Ministry uses to teleport groups of wizards to a specific location. He shares that the Ministry worked extremely hard to place Portkeys all over the world in order to give easy access to the World Cup, but it requires you to find the Portkey and be touching it at exactly the right time. So finally, after a very long and strenuous hike, they make it to the top of Stoat's Head Hill and meet Amos and Cedric Diggory. Of course, the kids already know who Cedric is from school, but Harry gets to meet Amos for the first time. And once again, the movie chose to remove some key bits of information from this meeting. Specifically, the fact that Amos Diggory is not a likable fellow. Right after meeting Harry, Amos begins to brag about his son and talk about the match that Harry had against Cedric the previous year. Just a reminder, in Harry's third year, he had faced Cedric, the Hufflepuff Seeker, and lost due to Dementors coming on the field and making him pass out. At the time, Cedric had tried to ask for a rematch, but the rules stated Hufflepuff won fair and square. So Amos seemed to have not forgotten this moment, and on behalf of his son, went on and on about how Cedric is a better flyer. Cedric tried to get his dad to shut up, explaining that Harry fell off of his broom. But Amos continued, saying that if Harry fell off his broom and Cedric didn't, that means Cedric must be better. The whole interaction reeks of a massive lack of self-awareness on the part of Amos, and immediately makes the reader dislike him. So I'm assuming the movie removed this conversation for two main reasons. First, they never included Cedric in the third film. But even if they had, reason number two for removing it would be because they want you to have empathy for Amos at the end of the story when you know what happens. If you didn't like Amos one bit, you'd probably not feel as bad for him. But anyway, Chapter 6 wraps up with the entire group touching the manky old boot and being teleported to a precise ministry-designated location for the World Cup. And that brings us straight into Chapter 7, as Harry and the others are greeted by some ministry workers who are managing their arrival of the Portkeys. The ministry official greets Arthur Weasley and tells them to get a move on because a large group is supposed to be arriving soon. Personally, I like that the book added so much more detail to the organization of this massive wizarding event. There's a lot of logistics and planning that go into it, and these chapters show that just because you have magic doesn't mean everything is easy peasy. Even the Quidditch World Cup has to have years of planning and organization to make it work. But anyway, after checking in and being directed to their campsite, they meet Mr. Roberts, who is a muggle and is completely unaware of what's going on at his campsite. After all, this muggle manager is checking in hundreds of random people wearing extremely strange outfits. He makes a comment about this to Mr. Weasley, and suddenly Harry sees a wizard appear out of nowhere and yell "Obliviate" at the muggle, wiping his memory of the weird things going on. The ministry wizard meets up with Mr. Weasley as they head to their lot and explains that he's had to modify Mr. Roberts' memory just about every 10 minutes due to lapses and anti-muggle security measures. Finally, after some walking, they reach a plot at the edge of the woods marked Weasley, spelled with a Z, and they begin setting up a couple two-man tents. Harry is confused, but he and Hermione help Mr. Weasley set it up. Remember, this is a muggle campground, and therefore they aren't allowed to use magic openly. As we'll soon see though, that doesn't stop most of the other witches and wizards around. They finish setting up their tents, and Harry has no idea how 10 people will fit into two tiny tents. But he goes inside and is blown away once he sees that it's the size of a 3-room apartment. Mr. Weasley then mentions that he borrowed the tent off of a colleague and it should do the trick for the time being, and then he sends Harry, Ron, and Hermione to fetch water while the others gather firewood. As Harry and the others explore the campsite on their way to get water, they see that pretty much everyone has thrown the guidelines out of the window. Wizarding children are running around with wands, others are on training broomsticks gliding a foot off the ground, and the tents seem to get progressively weirder as they went, with some having full gardens out front, chimneys, windows, and more. On their way to the water tap, they meet Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan, who are of course rooting for the Irish, and their tent is covered in shamrocks. Then they make it to the Bulgarian section, which has almost every tent covered in posters of Victor Crumb, the Bulgarian seeker. After getting some water, Harry, Ron, and Hermione run into Oliver Wood, Cho Chang, and Ernie Macmillan, all at different points. But eventually they get back to their site and see Mr. Weasley surrounded by broken matches as he tries to light a fire manually. Hermione rushes to help him with the matches, and soon enough they get a fire going to cook some food. And now we've come to the really important moment of this chapter, and that is the introduction of both Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch. As they're sitting by the fire, Mr. Weasley points out the different ministry officials to Harry and explains who they are. Eventually, Ludo Bagman arrives and sits down to have some tea. He is decked out in his old Quidditch robes, which he used to use when he played professionally, and they obviously don't fit him as well anymore. Also, remember that Ludo is the reason they even have tickets to go to the World Cup, which we'll talk about later. Ludo explains that he's taking bets and asks Arthur if he'd like to make a wager. So Mr. Weasley does, and then surprisingly, Fred and George step up and make a bet as well. But while Mr. Weasley only bet 1 galleon, Fred and George bet their entire savings, which was 37 galleons, 15 sickles, and 3 knuts. Mr. Weasley is shocked by this, but Ludo says that the boys have their own free will to make a bet. And of course he would encourage this because the twins make the craziest bet ever. They say that the Irish will win, but Crumb will catch the snitch, which if you know anything about Quidditch, you know this is an insane wager. So Ludo eagerly marks them down for the bet, and then Mr. Weasley changes the subject by bringing up Bertha Jorkins. Bagman brushes it off, saying that she's forgetful and will return eventually. And before their conversation can continue, we meet our next key character of the night, Barty Crouch. He arrives, causing Percy to become even more annoying than usual, and Ludo lets it slip that a special event will be taking place at Hogwarts soon. But Barty shuts him up quickly, as that is secret information. Finally, the chapter wraps up as the evening arrives and the game is about to begin. Merchandise begins to flood the camp, and Harry generously buys omnioculars for Hermione and Ron, as well as himself. Ron, who has always been uncomfortable with Harry's inherited wealth, protests, but Harry says that he just won't be getting Ron any Christmas gifts for the next 10 years, and that seems to satisfy him. By the way, omnioculars are yet another cool part of the magical world that we don't learn about in the movie. Despite Ron seeming to have one in the movie, we never learn what it really is. But the book explains that this was essentially a Quidditch viewer's best friend, as you could rewind plays, slow things down, and even get live commentary by looking through the glass. Anyway, each one was 10 galleons, which explains why Ron was so uncomfortable with Harry buying him one. Finally, after hearing a gong sound play throughout the camp, Mr. Weasley rounded up his group and they went off toward the stadium. And that is the end of Chapter 7. So now we come to the final chapter of today's video, which is Chapter 8. And it's all about the actual Quidditch World Cup match. In this chapter, we don't just hear about the game, but we are introduced to key characters at the match and to learn important details which play a role later in the plot. The chapter begins with Harry and the others hiking through the forest to get to the massive Quidditch stadium, which has been protected from muggles through enchantments. Mr. Weasley shares that anytime a muggle gets too close, they suddenly remember that they have an appointment elsewhere and quickly hurry off, which is pretty funny to think about. Anyway, as they get to the stadium, they are directed to the top box. Now, I know I said I'm not going to go through specific changes like a normal movies versus manuscripts episode, but this one I just have to point out because it's so drastically altered for the film. You see, in the movie, they make a point of having their seats be the worst in the house, and Lucius Malfoy in the movie even makes a point of mocking them for it. Then Draco tells them that Fudge invited them to the minister's box. Well, in the book, the top box that the Weasleys, Hermione, and Harry go to is the minister's box. Ludo Bagman, as the organizer of the entire event, had a seat there and was able to get Mr. Weasley tickets for him and his family. The book makes it clear that these are the best seats in the house, and we even read a couple pages later that the Malfoys are also seated in this box. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. Anyway, as Harry and the others take their seats, we meet one of the most central characters to this year's plot, Winky the House Elf. Winky is the house elf of none other than Barty Crouch, and she'll come up time and again during this book. But for now, Harry simply mistakes her as Dobby, as the elf had her hands over her face. After hearing the name Dobby, she opened her hands and eyes and saw Harry, telling him that she is Winky, but she knows Dobby. She then informs Harry that she doesn't know if freedom is a good thing for Dobby, who is now going around demanding pay for his work, which is unbecoming of a house elf. Before they can talk much more, Cornelius Fudge arrives and introduces Harry to the non-English-speaking Bulgarian minister. Then, at this point, the Malfoy family arrives, which includes Narcissa, by the way, not just Lucius and Draco. Then, soon after, the match begins, with Ludo Bagman commentating and introducing each team's mascots. Now, this is the second most important part of this chapter, as we meet the Bulgarian mascots, which are Vila. Vila are interesting creatures, which I would assume are inspired by sirens. You know, evil creatures meant to lure men in with supposed beauty, but are actually hideous monsters on the inside. Vila are like this, but magical, dancing on the field and causing Harry to nearly lose his mind. You see, when you watch or hear a Vila, you suddenly want to do anything you can to impress them, which Harry thought would be jumping off the top box to show his bravery and daring. Thankfully, he was stopped before he did so, and the Irish team mascots came onto the field. These mascots were leprechauns, and they flew around the stadium dropping gold coins everywhere they went. Both the leprechauns and the Vila will become important in the coming chapters, so make sure to tuck that information away for a later episode. For now, after the mascots did their thing, the teams were finally introduced, and the match began. We get a detailed play-by-play of the match, which included the Irish pretty easily outscoring the Bulgarians. It also included Crumb outmaneuvering the Irish Seeker and causing him to crash into the ground. Also, a funny side note is that while the match went on, each team's mascots got more and more irritated and eventually began their own little war, with the Vila even tossing fireballs at the leprechauns mid-game. Anyway, the match went on, and soon enough, Crumb got a broken and bloodied nose, but still caught the snitch, ending the game but not winning it. Sadly, the Irish were up by 160 points, and therefore, despite Crumb's magnificent catch, the Bulgarians lost. And if you remember Fred and George's earlier bet, this meant that Ludo Bagman owed the twins quite a bit of cash. But before that, the teams came up to the top box where the Weasleys were sitting, and so Harry got a close-up view of the Irish accepting their trophy and of Crumb standing there with a bloody nose. Then finally, to end the chapter, the twins went up to Bagman and stuck out their hands, waiting for their massive payout. And the truth of the Death Eaters invading the camp? Well, there's a lot you might not know if you've only watched the movies, as we'll soon witness Voldemort's loyalists torment Muggles and see who really conjured the Dark Mark in the sky. But that's not a discussion for today, as Chapter 8 is where we'll end things off for this video. Stay tuned for next episode to learn about the events that occurred after this exciting Quidditch World Cup. As always, thanks for watching, and be sure to comment your thoughts below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and check out the series playlist to catch up on all the episodes you might have missed so far. Lastly, I want to give a special thank you to Jason, Cody, Joshua, and the rest of my incredible Patreon supporters who make videos like this possible every month. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.